The story of the Mongol Empire does not begin with power, conquest, or armies. It begins with a boy abandoned on the cold Mongolian steppe, surrounded by enemies, hunger, and death. His name was Temujin, and nothing about his early life suggested that he would one day rule the largest land empire in human history. Temujin was born around 1162 in what is now modern-day Mongolia, a land defined by vast open grasslands, brutal winters, and constant tribal warfare. His father was a minor tribal leader, who was poisoned by rivals when Temujin was still a child. After his father's death, Temujin's family was cast out by their own tribe. They were left to survive alone, scavenging for roots, hunting small animals, and enduring extreme poverty. This early abandonment shaped Temujin's worldview. He learned quickly that loyalty was rare, survival was earned, and strength mattered more than noble birth. As a teenager, Temujin was captured by a rival clan and enslaved. He spent years living in chains, treated as property, constantly watched and humiliated. Yet even in captivity, he observed human behavior closely. He learned who could be trusted and who could not. Eventually, he escaped, an act that already marked him as different. Survival alone was not enough for Temujin. He wanted control over his fate, and eventually, over others. The Mongolian steppe at this time was not unified. It was divided among dozens of rival tribes who constantly raided, betrayed, and fought each other. There was no central authority, no laws beyond tribal customs, and no lasting peace. Temujin realized something most leaders of his time did not. The greatest enemy of the Mongols was not an external power, but themselves. Through a combination of strategic marriages, alliances, and calculated violence, Temujin slowly gathered followers. But unlike traditional tribal leaders, he did not reward loyalty based on family or status. He promoted people based on merit, skill, and loyalty alone. A former shepherd could become a general. A former enemy could become a trusted commander. This approach shattered traditional hierarchies, but created something revolutionary: an army loyal to a leader, not a tribe. By 1206, Temujin had defeated or absorbed all major Mongol tribes. In a historic gathering known as the Kurultai, he was declared the supreme ruler of all Mongols and given a new title, Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. This moment marked the birth of the Mongol Empire. What followed was not random violence, but a carefully organized system of conquest. Genghis Khan restructured Mongol society entirely. He introduced a legal code known as the Yasa, which enforced strict discipline, loyalty, and order. Theft, betrayal, and desertion were punished severely. At the same time, religious freedom was protected, and talent was valued regardless of background. This combination of harsh law and opportunity created an unusually efficient state. Militarily, the Mongols were unlike anything the world had seen. Their armies were composed almost entirely of highly skilled horse archers. Every Mongol soldier was trained from childhood to ride and shoot accurately at full speed. Their composite bows had greater range and power than those used by most armies. Communication was rapid, discipline was absolute, and mobility was unmatched. Genghis Khan also understood intelligence and psychology. Before attacking a city, the Mongols would offer surrender. If the city complied, it would be spared and absorbed into the empire. If it resisted, destruction followed. News of massacres spread quickly, often causing cities to surrender without a fight. Terror became a weapon as powerful as any army. The first major external target of the Mongols was the Khwarazmian Empire, a powerful Islamic state stretching across Central Asia. Initially, Genghis Khan sought trade and diplomacy. When Mongol envoys were murdered by Khwarazmian officials, Genghis Khan viewed it as an unforgivable insult. His response was devastating. The Mongol invasion of Khwarazm was not just a war. It was a demonstration of total destruction. Cities like Bokhara, Samarkand, and Urgench were besieged, breached, and obliterated. Entire populations were killed or enslaved. Complex irrigation systems were destroyed, permanently changing the landscape. Within a few years, one of the most powerful empires in the Islamic world ceased to exist. Yet the Mongols were not merely destroyers. They absorbed knowledge wherever they went. Engineers, scholars, doctors, and artisans were spared and relocated across the empire. Siege technology from China, administrative practices from Persia, and military tactics from many cultures were combined into a single, flexible system. Genghis Khan did not live to see the full extent of his empire. He died in 1227, during a campaign against the Western Xia dynasty. The circumstances of his death remain unclear, and his burial site is still unknown. But his legacy did not end with him. It expanded. Under his successors, especially his grandsons, the Mongol Empire reached its greatest size. It stretched from Korea to Eastern Europe, from Siberia to the Middle East. The empire was divided into regions known as khanates, each ruled by a descendant of Genghis Khan. Despite internal conflicts, the Mongols maintained control through military dominance and administrative efficiency. One of the most significant outcomes of Mongol rule was the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace. Trade routes across Eurasia became safer than they had ever been. The Silk Road flourished. Goods, technologies, and ideas moved freely between East and West. Gunpowder, paper currency, navigation techniques, and even the Black Death traveled along these routes, reshaping world history. However, the same system that allowed the empire to grow also made it fragile. Succession disputes, cultural differences, and the sheer size of the territory made centralized control impossible in the long term. Over time, the khanates became independent. Local rulers adopted local religions and customs. The unified Mongol Empire slowly fragmented. By the late 14th century, the Mongol Empire had effectively ceased to exist as a single political entity. But its impact was permanent. Borders were redrawn, populations displaced, and global connections accelerated. The modern world, in many ways, was shaped by Mongol expansion. Genghis Khan himself remains one of the most controversial figures in history. To some, he is a brutal conqueror responsible for unimaginable destruction and death. To others, he is a visionary leader who unified a fractured people, promoted merit over birth, and created the foundations of global exchange. Both views are true. What cannot be denied is this: a man who began life as a starving outcast rose to command an empire larger than any the world had ever known. He changed the course of history not through inherited power, but through strategy, adaptation, and an unbreakable will to survive. The Mongol Empire was not an accident. It was the result of deliberate choices, ruthless efficiency, and an understanding of power that few leaders before or after have matched. And even centuries later, the shadow of Genghis Khan still stretches across continents.